Hey there, you're listening to another episode of the Filmcraziest Show, and for today's interview, I was able to chat with Christo Brock, the writer, director, and producer of the new documentary called Brewmance. Brewmance is a love letter to homebrewing set in Long Beach, California, as the film gets insight from veterans of the brewing industry, as well as depicting two different teams trying to graduate from homebrewing to opening up their own brewery in Long Beach. The film is available on digital formats now. It was a fun conversation, so where we talk about a lot of beer and just a bunch of other things. So enjoy the show. So Christo Brock, writer and director of the documentary Brewmance. It's great to have you here.
Thanks. Great to be here.
So I'd love to start with just asking. So you've done sports documentaries. So I'm just curious to learn about your experience with craft beer and just learn about why you wanted to do a project like Brewmance.
Well, to be honest, I was not much of a beer drinker. I was an occasional beer drinker before I started making the film. But I was really just looking for a good story and something that I felt like I could tell. There's a lot of great stories out there that I'm not the guy to do it, but I kind of felt like, oh, I could be the guy to do this. So the more so it started with my friend Tom, who was a home brewer, and he told me about his homebrew club and how people would bring their beers and everybody would taste it and then they would share it around. And I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. And then he told me about this one guy who was a homebrewer there who was going to open this new craft brewery. And so we went there, a place called Smog City down in Torrance, and I tasted the beers on tap and I was floored. I mean, every one of those beers was tasty and rich and complex and different. And I thought, oh, wow, you know what? I think there's a story here. Let me do some more research. And then I realized, oh, yeah, there is a story there. And that's kind of how like craft beer came to be, is through these stalwart homebrewers.
Now, did it make you want to like start your own home brewing or not really?
It's a lot of work. I mean, and the best homebrewers are also very like meticulous, clean people. I'm not necessarily the most meticulous, clean people in the world. I mean, but the other thing is that when you witness someone else doing it, you see how much work is involved, and you kind of you appreciate that. So I have homebrewed a couple times since I started making the film, but I'm going to let the professionals do it because they're much better.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I don't think I could ever homebrew either.
It's fun. It's fun, but yeah, I like drinking other people's beer.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that was really relatable when the one character, one person, Eric, he said, "This is a job I enjoy, but it's not my beer," and I really thought that spoke to like how like these people feel when they have actually made their own beer and what that feels like.
Yeah, I think that's one of the great joys of being like a craft brewer, is to be able to like share your beer with somebody else. It's a little bit like cooking someone a meal, like being a chef. It's like being able to serve your creation on a plate and have someone taste it, enjoy it. And I think probably that's probably one of the great joys of being a brewer or a chef, is like seeing someone like your food or beer.
Okay. And then you said you did a few home brews. Did you let anyone taste it?
I did actually, and I got from Eric, was like, yeah, pretty good. I made a pilsner. My buddy likes really Czech fire pilsner, so we made a pilsner. But the problem is, he drank a lot of it, so there wasn't a lot left. This is all that's left. I'm sorry, I drank the rest. That's what happens. Must have been good.
Okay, fair enough. Also, I love your film because it's like beer is so universal. And I was just curious, what made you want to focus in on the brewers of Long Beach?
Well, so this is one of the sort of the things that I realized about beer, is that beer is everywhere. Because I was also considering making a film about wine, and what I realized is that wine is very regionalized, so it's very specific to a wine growing region. And even though they make wine in all 50 states, there are better wine growing regions than other. But if you're a beer maker, you don't care where the barley comes from. And a lot of it comes from Canada, a lot of it comes from the Midwest, because your beer is going to taste like your beer because of your water and your talents. So it makes it more specific to the people drinking it. So I always kind of thought that was more interesting too, that um, it was more responsive to the people in some ways. Although,
Okay.
like a bottle of wine, you don't really have somebody going like, I really want like a fruity Pinot, and then you have a winemaker thinking, okay, people want fruity Pinots, so I'm going to have to. They make the wine that the grapes want to be.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Now, I've noticed your baseball cap and the logo from the film.
Yeah.
I love the logo. Who designed that for you?
Well, I designed this with my graphic designer, Taylor. She's like, when you're an indie producer like me, you kind of have to be an artist entrepreneur in this world, because it's one thing to make a good film, and I'm not saying I made a good film, but I'm saying it's one thing to make a good film, and it's another thing to get someone to see it. And when you're not backed by a studio, which I'm not, it's really hard to get noticed. And then it becomes like any other business where you try to find some kind of branding and try to find some sort of title that people will respond to. And so now when I'm starting a film, I think really hard about that. Like, okay, how am I going to rise above the noise? And so part of it was like, oh, let's come up with a logo that's really simple, but sort of says what the film is. So I went through a couple of iterations, but a frothing beer heart. Yeah.
Yeah, and it definitely shows like, okay, this is a love letter to beer.
Totally. That's what it is. I'm a glass half full, like, let's look at the wonder around us kind of guy, not the, oh, let's solve the ills of the world. There are a lot of wonderful filmmakers who are much better at that than me. I want to look at something that's cool and make a film that someone wants to see.
Cool. And also just with the logo, like, and all the animations in the film, what was that like having those animations for your documentary?
So once we settled on our graphic style, and with Emily, we came up with a poster, which is actually the back of this shirt, which is the beer making process. And we went for a very specific style of sort of those very simple icons, as flat icons with limited colors. And my producer, Mark Metternach, the animation producer, hooked me up with this outfit in Chile called Smog. And they basically took all these elements that we had created for this poster and modified them for the film. And then that became their template to make the animations. And I will say one thing though. Usually, because I talked to some other people, usually when you do animations, you go to full frame. So in other words, like the whole frame becomes
Okay.
stuff. But with this, I wanted to do something a little different, because in the how to make beer sequence, you hear voices from a lot of different well-known brewers. And so I wanted you to be able to see Ken Grossman next to Jim Koch, next to Larry Bell, and you're going through and you learn very simple how to make beer. But I wanted them to stay on camera. So what we did is found a way to combine the animations with these interviews, these talking heads. I think it turned out pretty well.
Okay. I agree. I like the way it looks and how it's kind of like separated by chapters almost of like, okay, this is this ingredient for beer, and then this is this one. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. We're trying to, you're trying to tell a few different stories here. You got to be careful you don't confuse people or go down too many different paths. So hopefully it all congeals together.
Okay. Yeah, because you don't want people to mix up the barley with the hops, right?
Yeah, or just be like, oh God, another element. I already know about this. We used to know about it.
Now, I wanted to ask about the music in the film and with Danny's band, Real Big Fish. Had you listened to their music before this documentary?
Not so much. I have to say, I was not a big ska fan, but I was really like delighted to like run into Danny and then discover his music. And I got to say, their manager was awesome and let us use a lot of the songs. Big shout out to Real Big Fish. Those guys are fantastic. It's kind of cool having an ex rock star in your film too. Right?
Yeah, it is. How did you get them for this?
Just luck.
Yeah.
Right place, right place, right place, right time. You know.
Okay.
And he's like, "Yeah, I am Danny." I'm like, "Oh, cool."
And back to what you were saying about being an indie producer, it seems very beneficial that Real Big Fish did let you use so many songs for the film.
Yeah, because it's always the rub when you're trying to use real like pop music or rock music. The rights for these songs are exorbitant, and it's only getting worse now. I mean, I just saw Paul Simon sold his music catalog. So what happens is you're having these venture firms buying up, like Bob Dylan sold his whole catalog.
Okay.
So now, whenever you want to use one of Bob Dylan's songs, it'll cost you $50,000, which for me is impossible. So it was nice to be able to have like some authenticity in the film, and plus, it's like Danny played on those songs. You know, you can hear his trombone in the background wailing.
And it's very fitting that they have a song called Beer as well.
Yeah, I know. Well, and so I don't want to get too technical, but that performance is we got the rights to the publishing rights, but not the performance. So that performance was shot in Vienna, so it was outside of the U.S. If it was in the U.S., we would. That's the only way we could use it. It was still really expensive, but yeah, totally worth it.
Beer. Okay. Yeah, exactly. I also wanted to ask, I hope this isn't a spoiler, but just on the opening days of their breweries, I was curious if you had gotten any reactions from their patrons of what they thought of the beers and if you talked to them at all.
Oh, I mean, people love their beers. You know, I mean, yeah, I mean, they've got hardcore fans. And so I think you saw in the, I'm not going to ruin this for you, but in Liberation, Barry Hansen, also known as Dr. Demento, is like a big fan.
Okay.
And he comes by all the time and talks with Eric about music, and they share a beer or two. Yeah, it's pretty hardcore. And during COVID, he would come by a lot, fill a growler. The same thing with 10 Mile. They had this super committed base. People just love their beers, and I mean, they make good beers, so good for them, man. I mean, it's good for anybody who can go pro and keep it going because it's hard.
For sure. Now, for someone like you who had done a couple of homebrews, I was just curious if, obviously, this is a love letter to brewing at home and just upscaling as well. But is there any advice that you would want to give to aspiring home brewers?
Have fun. If it's not fun, it's not worth it. That's the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Is that you want more advice? I really am not qualified to give more advice than that. Okay, here's the other advice: find someone who knows what they're doing. It becomes a lot easier. Brew with them. No, but it's fun. I mean, you get to. I've done this with Tom, my buddy, who brought me in this whole project, and you hang out for a day, and you're doing the mash, and you're having beers at the same time, and hopefully you're sober enough just at the end, and you're not fucking things up, and it's a fun process.
Okay, cool. Now, I have a couple beer questions just to close it out. So I was curious if would you want to take me back to the first sip of beer you had in your life, like the story of that one?
Ooh, I don't know if I can remember it because I probably stole some of my parents' friends' beer at a party when I was, I think, 6 or something. I have to say, man, it took me a long time to like beer. I mean, it wasn't until I got to college and I was slamming it in a basement. But that beer didn't taste good. I do remember, like, I went to school up in New Hampshire, and we could cross over the bridge to Vermont where you can buy beer, and I would get on my bike and ride and come back with like Molson. I was like, I'm drinking Molson. This is really fancy. And then there was like Henry Weinhard's that came about, and I was like, oh, I'm drinking Henry Weinhard's. This is pretty cool, you know. And then Red Hook, and then there were like all these different sort of interesting phases of craft beer. It's sort of taken a long time to get where it is today, where you have like these amazing beers and amazing diversity, and the Alchemist, you have Pliny, you have these sort of mythical beers. You know, it's
Sure.
beer's in a much better place now than it ever has been. Sure.
Okay, great. Now, have you had a best sip of beer?
Ooh, that's a dangerous question. I mean, it's like, what's your favorite film? I would say I've had many best sips of beer.
Okay.
I mean, one of the great things about like traveling around the country and talking to some of these awesome brewers is to taste their beers. So, you know, up in Santa Rosa, I go to Vinny's Russian River Tap House and taste some of those interesting beers that you can't find anywhere else, or going out to Bell's Brewery in Michigan, Kalamazoo, and having some of his crazy beers. Yeah, drinking beers in the barrel room with Jim Cook in Boston, 9 in the morning. Keeping up with it. Cheers, dude.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Hopefully, there's more good taste to come.
I hope so. Okay. Also, on the last one I had, finally, when people watch your film, do you have a suggestion of one or two or a couple craft beers they could pair it with?
Ooh, I would say whatever your favorite local beers, because like depending where you're watching it, you should grab one of your local beers. I personally, I am tending a little bit more towards the lighter side of beers. Still love me a good IPA, and I would say I'm blonding it up a little bit. Not
Okay.
afraid to say that.
I'd be the same. So yeah, support your local breweries.
Yeah, yeah. Wherever you are, it's like there's a good beer waiting for you somewhere.
Awesome. Cool. So I think that is my time. So Christo Brock, writer and director, and I think a producer as well.
Indeed.
On
And
yes, on Brewmance. Thank you so much for chatting with me on the Film Craziest Show.
Daniel, I just want to say, anybody, if you're trying to figure out where to watch the film, go to brewmancemovie.com, because there's a little watch tab, and it's not available on Netflix or Hulu or any of those subscription platforms. It's anywhere you buy or rent movies now, and you can also get this hat and swag.
Ooh, on the website, there's merchandise.
Oh yes,
Okay, great.
yes.
Okay, I appreciate you plugging that for me. Thank you.
Thanks for letting me plug it.
Awesome.